reverse engineer an IBM PC with me?
Why? What would be the point?
Because I want to build a machine that nobody else has the balls to build.
AMC's hit series, *Halt and Catch Fire*, revolves around a company called Cardiff Electric, who in the early 1980s decides to clone an IBM PC and build a portable version. This, of course, leads to a room full of lawyers and a variety of dramatic events, and while this show is entirely fictional, it is loosely based on Compaq Computer Corporation. It's difficult to pin down the first ever IBM clone because there were a lot of computers in the early 80s that claimed to be MS-DOS compatible. But a lot of those computers were really limited in what software they could actually run, and they weren't really compatible with the IBM hardware. But what I have in front of me here are two of the earliest examples of IBM compatible computers that were more or less 100% compatible. Compaq was founded by three guys, Rod Canyon, Jim Harris, and Bill Murto. All three were former Texas Instruments employees who left to form their own computer company. Rod Canyon wanted to build a portable computer similar to the Osborne, which had come out the year before. The problem wasn't just building the computer, but making sure there was enough software that customers would find the computer useful. By this point, there were 100 different incompatible computer architectures in the market already, and adding one more wasn't likely to give them a very big slice of the computer market. But then Rod wondered if maybe there was a way they could design their new computer to be compatible with existing software. Computers made by companies like Commodore and Atari had a lot of proprietary chips, such as video chips and audio chips, and these chips were not easy to duplicate, and doing so would surely invite a big lawsuit. But the IBM PC was different. IBM had designed the computer using all off-the-shelf parts, so it would be totally legal to make another computer exactly like it. There was only one problem: the BIOS. This chip contained the ROM code that made the computer start up and handle all of the input and output, so everything from reading the keyboard to putting characters on the screen. This ROM code was copyrighted. But there was nothing to stop someone from writing their own compatible BIOS ROM from the ground up, and that's exactly what Compaq and Hyperion did. The Hyperion was the first to market in January of 1983, followed by the Compaq 2 months later in March. Let's start by taking a look at the Compaq Portable. At 28 pounds, it certainly doesn't seem very portable by today's standards. But compared to lugging around an IBM PC and monitor, it actually was quite portable. There's a sliding door on this side revealing the power supply, and on the other side reveals 5 card slots. So unlike other portables, this one was very expandable. In fact, I've installed a Compaq flash reader as a hard drive substitute. It has 2 little legs on the bottom which help to elevate the screen when you lay it down. So let me set this thing down and show you how it works. To remove the keyboard, you just slide these 2 release latches. And typically you would also want to pull out these little legs on the bottom of the keyboard. There you go. And here's where the power cord goes. This is the only wire the computer actually needs. And while we're looking at this, one interesting thing I wanted to show you is that you can coil up the power cord and shove it up into this little space here. It was actually designed that way so you could carry the power cord inside the computer. The keyboard layout is a little strange by today's standards. You have 10 function keys over here on the left. The backslash is in a weird place here. And there are no dedicated cursor keys, or rather you have to use the cursor keys that are part of the number pad. Now believe it or not, this is exactly how the IBM keyboard of the time was, except for the location of the backslash. Over here you get a brightness knob for the screen, and this particular unit comes with a single full-height floppy and a hard drive over here. Now, this particular model has the really early style floppy drives just like the IBM used, but later models had the lever style drives, and some configurations of a computer like this one had dual floppy drives. The keyboard cable is not terribly long, but it does give a little freedom to move it around some. Now, it has these 5 card slots on the side, but how do you actually get to those? Well, you'll have to disassemble the computer to some degree. Myself, I have to use a screwdriver to do this. Actually, usually 2 screwdrivers. But I've heard stories that Compaq technicians did this often enough that they could remove the cover with their bare hands using no tools at all. There's several different self-contained compartments here. You can take this off and have access to the drives. This will give you access to the high voltage system like the CRT and the power supply. And this section here will give you access to the cards. You'll need a screwdriver to loosen some of these screws, and there you go. Now you can upgrade or install whatever you want. You could even put an AdLib or Sound Blaster card in here if you wanted. The video card is sort of special because it has a little internal header for the internal monitor to connect. However, the video card has another trick up its sleeve. Both the Hyperion and the Compaq also added a unique system for display. You see, in the early days, when you went to buy an IBM PC, you actually needed to choose which type of monitor you'd be using, CGA or MDA. But it wasn't just a monitor type you would pick, but also a video card to go with it. So what was the difference between the two? MDA was a monochrome text-only display. It had no graphics modes at all. However, it ran at a higher frequency than CGA, which gave it a higher resolution and therefore very sharp text. CGA, on the other hand, had 16-color text, but less resolution, and at a higher price. Despite MDA's inferior capabilities, many businesses still preferred it for the sharper text, which they said was easier on the eyes. Also, it was typically displayed on an amber screen, which they also said was easier on the eyes. If you take a look at this comparison, you can see the two different fonts that were used for MDA and CGA. And as you can see, there's a noticeable difference, and I suppose, if you were working with text all day long, maybe MDA would have been a decent trade-off. Because the two video systems used totally different frequencies, you could not interchange monitors between the two different cards. So it was generally not possible to have a computer that had sharp text and color graphics on the same system. But since the Compaq and Hyperion machines had internal monitors, they decided to create custom video cards that could display both MDA and CGA, and the CRT controller could change frequencies to adapt to each mode. Now, let me demonstrate this on the Compaq. So here we are looking at a standard text screen. By default, the Compaq starts up in MDA mode. However, if I want to force CGA mode, I can hold down Control, Alt, and then press the less than or greater than to alternate between the two modes. And you'll hear a click of a relay, and there you go. You can probably see that the text is a bit chunkier looking now. Let's try again. MDA mode and CGA mode. Of course, the card is smart enough to know that if you select a graphics mode, such as when playing a game, it will automatically switch to CGA mode. Also, the card does have RGBI and composite outputs, but in order to use them, you'll have to make sure the card is in CGA mode. But as a result, that means you can get full color using CGA composite mode on games that support it. And just to toot my own horn a bit, Planet X3 works great on this computer in composite mode using a full 16-color palette. And it also works well on the internal green screen in 4-color mode. And let's try an RGBI monitor. This will give you a full 16 colors of text. Now, even though the internal screen is monochrome, CGA graphics actually look pretty good on it. I mean, CGA typically only had 4 colors anyway, and they were not the best choices for colors either. So in many ways, a grayscale, or in this case greenscale display with 4 shades of green actually looks better on a lot of games. Now, for example, when you look at the 4 shades of green here, there's a nice even gradient. But the same thing displayed on the RGB monitor uses a terrible palette. I wouldn't necessarily say the Compaq Portable is a great MS-DOS gaming computer, but not so much because it uses CGA, but mostly because it runs at 4.77 MHz, so a lot of DOS games either won't run or just run too slow to be really playable. And remember, this computer came out a year before EGA graphics was even introduced, and many years before software for such cards became widespread. So the graphics that it has is very much appropriate for the time period. I've heard rumors that you could get an EGA card that had an internal header so you could play your games in 16 shades of green, or in full color on an external monitor, but I've never seen one. Now let's have a look at the Hyperion. It is considered portable as well, but it came in this carry bag. Admittedly, because of this, it took a little longer to pack and unpack than the Compaq. However, it was 10 pounds lighter than the Compaq, which is certainly worth something. In fact, you can see it's a good bit smaller than the Compaq. However, it's almost exactly the same height, despite having a much smaller screen. The keyboard pulls out from a little tray like this, but also has some little legs on the bottom that you'll need to extend. And there you go. It's actually a nice looking system. It definitely has a more integrated look than the Compaq, which is mostly built from off-the-shelf components. For example, the disk drives are very unique. I've never seen any that work like this. You just press the front and they pop open. On the keyboard, they did put the function keys at the top, like more modern systems, but it still only has 10 of them, which was pretty standard for XT-class machines. Also, like the IBM and the Compaq, it has no dedicated cursor keys, again, requiring the use of the number pad for that. I do like the fact that it has a carry handle on top, similar to the early Macintosh machines.
And of course, on the rear of the computer, you got your regular power port, a composite video, looks like it has a built-in modem, floppy drive, parallel port, and I don't know, probably some kind of bus port where you could, I don't know, that remains to be seen.
Well, let's plug it in and have a look. I love the light up power button. This thing is also a lot quieter than the Compaq. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a problem. I think one of the capacitors for the CRT deflection have gone bad right as I was getting ready to film this episode. And while the top of the screen looks okay, it gets squished at the bottom. Anyway, the Hyperion could run regular MS-DOS, but it actually came with its own Hyperion DOS, which is a bit different. If you look at the bottom of the screen, there are these hotkeys assigned to function keys, and it's designed to make DOS easier to navigate. And I'd love to demonstrate this to you further, but the computer isn't going to cooperate. What's worse is that the return key also died right in the middle of filming this. All the other keys still work, just not the return key. So I guess I won't be able to demonstrate this one much. So how did these computers do in the marketplace? Well, the Compaq was an immediate success. Originally priced at $3,590, it was competitive with the IBM PC. However, IBM wasn't offering any sort of portable computer at that point, so if you wanted a portable IBM PC, you had to buy a Compaq. And despite great sales, IBM wasn't particularly concerned. Unlike the scenes from *Halt and Catch Fire*, IBM was almost silent on the matter, feeling that Compaq was only a minor nuisance. They figured they could bring out their own portable computer, and that would essentially be the end of Compaq. In fact, Compaq was quite worried about the introduction of the IBM 5155 Portable. As you can see, it is a very similar design to the Compaq, albeit a slightly longer body but also slightly thinner. Otherwise, the fold-out keyboard design was very similar. Once IBM announced that they were about to bring out their own portable, sales of the Compaq started to dry up, and resellers stopped ordering the Compaq, figuring they'd be selling the IBM product instead in a few months. Compaq feared they might actually go out of business as a result. Rod Kenyon had a decision to make. The way he saw it, there were two options. On one hand, they could either cut production and watch as IBM slowly chipped away at Compaq's customer base, eventually running them out of business, or they could just keep cranking out Compaq systems at full speed even though nobody was ordering them. The idea behind that being that just in case IBM had production problems or a delayed launch. So they continued to load up thousands of Compaq systems and park them in tractor trailers all around the city of Houston and just waited. And that turned out to be the winning solution because it turned out IBM did have production problems, and so when the resellers started looking for portable computers again, they started ordering the Compaq systems again in a big way, and Compaq was ready with stock on hand. And so Compaq prevailed and continued to make new products such as the Compaq Portable 2, Portable 3, and even desktop systems called the Desk Pro. But what about the Hyperion? How did it fare on the market? The Hyperion, on the other hand, continued to have reliability problems, specifically with the floppy drives, but they also had a lot of production problems. They had bottlenecks at the border. For example, they had issues getting parts from the United States into Canada, and then they had bottlenecks getting the completed units out of Canada back to the United States, where their primary customer base was. In fact, they even had financial problems. At one point, they changed names from Dynalogic to Bytec. Now, Compaq was immune to these problems because their manufacturing was based out of Houston, Texas. In fact, Hyperion had apparently made a deal to have Commodore manufacture the computer in the USA and sell the computer under the Commodore brand name. In fact, if you look at this promotional ad from Commodore, you can actually see the Hyperion here, and if you look closely, you can see the Commodore brand name printed on the front. Now, here's another grainy photo, but you can actually see the Commodore brand is embossed into the plastic. However, for whatever reason, the deal with Commodore fell through. Although Compaq survived the introduction of IBM's Portable onto the marketplace, the Hyperion did not. Another possibly overlooked issue is that the Compaq and the IBM Portable were both expandable and that they had internal card slots. The Hyperion did not, and so there was a rumored hard drive that could connect to that big external connection on the back. And if it did exist, it was only available in small numbers. And so, for the most part, the Hyperion was a floppy-only system. So here's an interesting comparison. Which computer is better as a collectible today, the Compaq or the Osborne? After all, at the time of Compaq's launch, the Osborne was the nearest competitor. Well, if you're just going to sit them on a shelf as a collectible, either one will do. But for me, I definitely go with the Compaq today. After all, the Osborne is a text-only system designed to run CP/M, which was mostly business software. The Compaq, on the other hand, with its IBM compatibility, means you can run thousands of old MS-DOS games, which is considerably more interesting. And so that about wraps it up for the Compaq and the Hyperion. Now, I hope to come back to the Hyperion again once I get it fixed up. And I also have a Compaq Portable 2 and Portable 3 that also need fixing, and I hope to bring those to you eventually. So stick around for those, and thanks for watching.